No, how do you describe his action? You could say it was making a joke, which would be the object of the act. I mean, this is the description of what he's up to. You could describe it by its effect, which would be the making the grandmother even more sad. You could describe it by what else? By the circumstances which would make it objectively inappropriate to do at this time or place. You could describe it by the kid's intention, which is just to amuse, you see? It's a joke, it's an attempt to amuse, and it's also misplaced. And, or it could be, suppose the kid is trying to do this in order to annoy the grandmother, see? Or wound the grandmother. You see, then it becomes an entirely different act. An act which is, on the one level, an act of amusement, could be on another level an act of cruelty. See? Now, so you can see that the description of the action, while it's the initial starting point of the description of the action is the genre of that is simply the action itself, which is telling a joke. You could describe it further by the further intention that the kid had in making the joke, or you could describe it by its most probable effect, the most probable result. Many actions are like that. Many actions can be described either by just a more or less physical description of what they do, or by the end that the person had in mind in doing them, or by the circumstances which made the result more or less likely. Now sometimes these actions, sometimes the object of an action and the intention with which you do the action are so close that the distinction is hard to make. For example, if you had breakfast this morning, having breakfast is an act of nourishment, right? That's the purpose. Your intention is in having breakfast is to have breakfast. It's an act of nourishment. What you're doing has an intention built into it, you see? What you're doing has an intention that is built into it that can't be separated out of it. So no matter what else you're doing when you're having breakfast, you are you are performing an action of nourishment. But you might be having another action as well. It might be an action of socialization. You might be at dinner, for example. You might not just be having an act of nutrition. That would be kind of a bare bones description. You'd also be having a family time, right? So you're intending, there are further intentions that are less closely but still really tied into what you're doing. Eating together is not only intrinsically nutritional, eating together is also, I would argue, intrinsically social, right? So you can't really separate the intention with which you perform the action from the action itself. Now there are other actions that you undertake where the intention with which you perform the action is entirely different from, removable from, the actual deed that you're doing. Aristotle gives the example of becoming a thief to commit adultery. Let us say you are Giovanni, and Giovanni is smitten by the Countessa Helena, okay? But alas, the Countessa Helena is far beyond my means. She has tastes in diamonds and gold and likes to go to balls and is really an expensive date. I, on the other hand, drive a cab. How am I, Giovanni, going to get to Contessa to meet her? Well, obviously, the only way I can get to meet her is by robbing some banks. Okay, so so I'm a thief. I steal jewelry in order to have diamonds to present to the Contessa Helena. What am I? Aristotle would say that when I steal the diamonds, I'm a thief, for sure. And of course, but I'm not just a thief, I'm also an adulterer. If Helena is married to somebody else, the intention with which I took the diamonds marks me not just as a thief, but also as an adulterer. That is true, even if I never actually get around to committing adultery. You know, in other words, I present the diamonds to Helena, and she looks at me as though I were a side dish she hadn't ordered. You see? I have a diamond for you. I've got lots of those, she says. You know, she's a very rich Contessa, you know, so my diamonds make no impression on her at all. She sniffs and goes off to, you know, and leaves me there. Well, richer, of course, but still unfulfilled in the main purpose with which I undertook the undertaking. See, so there are some actions that have the intention so closely built into them that you can't really separate what you're doing from why you're doing it. But there are other actions where what you're doing and why you're doing it are only tangentially related, right? I have breakfast with somebody in order to impress them so that I can get a job. So the whole moral quality of my further intention of getting a job has to really be weighed into the evaluation of my having the meal to begin with. That's why things like dinner dates are not really innocent, you know, or in fact might be very good. So ordinary actions can take on the moral quality and do take on the moral quality of the further ends that inspire them. So an ordinary action can in fact be very good, depending on the further intention with which it is performed, and an ordinary, even good action can become very bad if it's done with a further bad intention. So, St. Thomas gives the example of giving alms to the poor. This is a good action. Well, yeah, it's a very good action. But if you're doing it in order to get your space in the society section of the newspaper, you know, socialite Bruce Wayne, you know, funds charities. Well, this is what you want. You want the newspaper people out to to stately Wayne Manor. You want a reputation as a philanthropist. That intention of vanity spoils your act of almsgiving. See? Now, that doesn't mean that people aren't better off because of what you did. I mean, the people that you gave money to still benefit from it, even though you have a defective further intention. Nevertheless, you see, even though the poor benefit from my action, I do not. I do not. Because my furthest end was vanity or fame, I have now become a shallow, fame-seeking person, even though I got there by giving away money to the poor. See? So your furthest ends can give a distinctive moral quality to the action that a mere external observer would never pick up. Now, St. Thomas has a maxim that is worth talking about briefly. He says that with respect to an action, bonum ex integer causa, malum ex quicumque defectu. This is always a promising line to begin a cocktail party conversation when people want to know right away what you mean. Bonum ex integer causa, malum ex quicumque defectu. It means that for an action to be morally good, everything together has to be fitting. The action has to be good of its type. Because there are some actions that are just bad of their type. I mean, telling a joke is neutral or maybe good. Acting to harm someone is always a bad kind of thing. There are some kinds of actions that are good or bad as to their very basic type.